Hello again, and welcome to the first lesson of the Jerusalemite Sephardic Tradition Unit. In this unit of our course, we will turn our eyes and ears to a city which is featured in each of our previous units, the city in which we are filming and making this course, and where our Academy of Music and Dance was founded in the year 1933, Jerusalem. Our unit's focus is the Jerusalemite Sephardic tradition. This significant tradition developed in the city during the last few centuries and became part and parcel of Jerusalem's soundscape. Even today, this tradition continues to develop and transform. Just like in previous units, in this session we will learn and acquaint ourselves with the tradition from several angles. First, we will look into the historical development of the Sephardic Jerusalemite tradition. Then, with the help of both researchers and practitioners of this tradition, we will conduct a panel discussion dedicated to more recent developments and the current status of the tradition in its various contemporary manifestations. Finally, we will of course head over to a lesson with Cantor Moshe Chabusha and learn the piyut Ya Shema Evyonecha, God, hear your wretched, identified as one of the ancient devotional songs of the Jerusalemite Sephardic tradition. And so, we begin with a seemingly simple question. What is the meaning of the term Jerusalemite Sephardic? What does Jerusalemite and Sephardic mean in this context? Jerusalem has a long history of Jewish music, dating back to the days of the temples and the musical festivities which took place in them. However, the tradition we explore today, although grounded in ancient roots, actually developed during modern times, from the 16th century onward, and has continued to do so from the late 19th century and early 20th century to this day. It is now practiced in the city and outside of it, and even abroad, by several communities from various Middle Eastern and North African backgrounds, and is considered to be a main nusach, a prayer tradition in Israel. We can distinguish between two historical layers within this tradition, an older one dating as early as the 16th century and strongly identified with the Sephardi Jews who arrived in Jerusalem during that century. The second is a more modern layer, which has involved the expansion of the tradition through the encounter with other Jewish communities and ethnicities in the last 150 years or so. Let's dive a bit into the history of each of those layers and their musical foundations. Following their brutal expulsion from Spain and Portugal in 1492 and 1497 respectively, the mass of Sephardi Jews spread among the Jewish communities in Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. The Sephardic Jews did not hurry to arrive in Jerusalem, which was a provincial city of the Mamluk Empire at that time. Instead, they preferred to settle in stronger Jewish centers such as Thessaloniki, Constantinople, Istanbul, and Safed. However, following the Ottoman occupation of the city at the end of 1516, the flow of Sephardi Jews to Jerusalem increased, strengthening their status within the local community. Historical sources distinguish between four main groups of Jews living in Jerusalem during the early 16th century. The first is the Eastern and Central European Ashkenazi Jews, who arrived in the city due to rising anti-Semitism in Europe. The next are the newly arrived Sephardi Jews from Spain. The third group is the Jews from North Africa, especially Morocco, called Mugrabim, from the word Maghreb, meaning the West, due to the relative geographical position of North Africa to Jerusalem. The fourth group of Jews living in Jerusalem at that time is the native Jews, called Musta'arabi, a term coined by the Sephardi immigrants for the old Jewish communities in the Muslim world, including Eretz Israel. Throughout the 16th century, the Sephardi Jewish community in Jerusalem steadily gained influence, gradually replacing the older Ashkenazi elite, which had previously managed the community's internal affairs and represented it to external entities, including other Jewish communities and foreign rulers. By the end of this century, the religious customs and the nusach, the manner of prayer, in the central synagogue in Jerusalem were based on Sephardic traditions. Consequently, other communities, such as the Musta'arabi Jews and the Mughrabim, North African Jews, were partially absorbed into the Sephardic community, adopting their nusach of prayer. What did this tradition sound like? As regard to the nusach itself, not a lot can be said due to the lack of historical evidence. A clear timeline of the nusach's development remains elusive and cannot be established. In addition, the piyutim repertoire also raises more questions than answers. We can presume that the Sephardic Jews brought with them the piyutim's melodies sung by the communities in Spain, but we are not able to tell what these melodies sounded like. However, we do know that at some point in time, this musical heritage began to be integrated with the local musical traditions of the new surroundings in North Africa and the Middle East, and of course, in Jerusalem. In this process, which as we already learned was coined Makamization, old liturgical prayers and newer paraliturgical piyutim of the local Sephardic Jewish community were gradually set into the system of the Makam, and especially the Turkish Makam, which constituted the musical hegemony of the area at that time. Israel Najara, the renowned 16th century Paytan, who as we learned was himself a descendant of expelled Sephardic family, even wrote explicitly in the introduction to his influential collection of piyutim, Zmirot Israel, this is a cycle of piyutim and songs based on the foundation of the manner of Arab and Turkish melodies. The next main stage in the development of this tradition arrived with the many migrations of Jews into Jerusalem from various locations in the Middle East and North Africa during the last century and a half. This has challenged the Jerusalemite Sephardic tradition to respond and transform. The newcomers to Jerusalem, both before and after Israel's independence in 1948, brought their own musical tastes and styles with them. Many of these were influenced by newer trends in the music of the Arab world, where, as we already know, these Jewish communities played a significant role. That is, the Makamization process continued, but now the sonic reference point was the Arab Makam, which differed significantly from the Turkish system that has previously dominated Sephardic Jerusalemite prayers. Modernization fueled these trends as recordings of famous Arab singers became widespread and very popular among Jewish communities, gradually replacing the old Ottoman style with contemporary styles of the surrounding Levant traditions. Social developments further contributed to the merging of the older Sephardic tradition with other local traditions from Aleppo, Iraq, Egypt, and elsewhere. The establishment of shared synagogues, where Jewish communities from different regions within the Islamic world gathered, played a major role in this process. Additionally, inter-communities marriages between Mizrahi Jews from different regions and shifting hegemonies within and between communities further accelerated the hybridization of various Middle Eastern and North African Jewish musical traditions. A key role in this development was played by the Aleppian Jews who settled in Jerusalem from the late 19th century onward. This community, with an exceptionally large number of rabbis and religious scholars, gradually became a significant part of the local Jewish elite. Following the establishment of the Aleppian Jews synagogue in 1901, the Ades synagogue, which we mentioned in our discussion of the Bakashot, it became a central religious hub not only for the Aleppian Jews, but also for members of other communities. They sought to learn and experience Aleppian Jewry unique musical traditions, particularly the mystical Bakashot custom. A major figure in spreading the Aleppian tradition in Jerusalem was Rabbi and poet Chaim Shaul Abud. After arriving in Jerusalem in 1929, Abud formed a choir dedicated to the Piyutim repertoire of Aleppian Jews. The members of this choir, many of whom became cantors in various synagogues across the city, laid the foundation of the modern Sephardic Jerusalemite tradition. In a delicate cultural and musical process, the old Sephardic Jerusalemite tradition absorbed features of the Aleppian heritage and other traditions while still maintaining some of its older characteristics. This process, still developing to this day, had various repercussions: musical, cultural, and social. Contemporary trends, such as the crystallization process of a local Israeli tradition, or rather traditions, and the transformation of some religious ceremonies like the Bakashot and Slichot into public events and concerts performed outside of the synagogue, further contribute and complicate those developments. For a wider perspective on this recent history and complicated current state of the Sephardic Jerusalemite tradition, we have gathered a panel of experts, both researchers and practitioners. The panel aims to bring together diverse perspectives on this developing issue, fostering a discourse that does not seek clear answers and definitive conclusions, but rather prefers additional consideration and deeper contemplation. We invite you to join us in this conversation during the next video.